The cabin stood on the edge of a forgotten tract of land, its weather-beaten timbers a testament to decades of neglect. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating piles of what most would call junk. But for 32-year-old Emma Sullivan, recently abandoned and 7 months pregnant, this dilapidated shelter represented her last resort. Her savings, once earmarked for a nursery in the city apartment she'd shared with Michael, had instead purchased this precarious refuge, far from judging eyes and painful memories. As she stood in the cluttered main room, a hand resting on her swollen belly, something caught her eye beneath years of accumulated debris. What secrets did this cabin hold? And why did she feel such a strange, inexplicable pull to this place? The morning light was harsh against Emma's swollen eyes as she crammed the last of her bags into her 10-year-old sedan. 3 months ago, this trunk had been filled with shopping bags from a downtown baby boutique, a woodland animal mobile, soft yellow blankets, and a stack of parenting books with colorful sticky notes marking important pages. Now, those items remained in the apartment she'd shared with Michael, abandoned just as she had been. Emma placed a hand over her rounded stomach, feeling the gentle flutter within. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered. The baby kicked in response, a comforting presence amidst the wreckage of her plans. The memory of Michael's face when she told him about the pregnancy still stung. They'd been careful. She'd been careful. Yet here she was, 32 and pregnant, despite their mutual agreement that children weren't part of their 5-year plan. The shock in his eyes had quickly hardened into something colder, more calculated. He didn't yell or make a scene. Instead, he simply began to pack, explaining in his calm, lawyerly voice how this development was not compatible with his career trajectory. "I care about you," he'd said, not meeting her eyes as he folded his designer shirts into a suitcase. "But we discussed this. I was clear from day one that fatherhood isn't for me." 6 years together, erased in 6 hours. Emma slammed the trunk shut and took one last look at the Chicago apartment building that had been her home. The city, once buzzing with possibility, now felt suffocating, too loud, too judgmental, too full of ghosts. The pitying looks from coworkers, her mother's thinly veiled disappointment, her friends' clumsy attempts at comfort. The real estate ad had appeared on her phone like an answer to an unspoken prayer. A cabin in rural Vermont, miles from the nearest town, priced shockingly low due to its condition. "Renovator's potential," the description read, "sold with contents." The photos showed a weathered structure surrounded by overgrown meadows and dense woods. Something about it called to her, offering a sanctuary from sympathetic gazes and well-meaning advice. One call to the realtor, one deep dive into her savings account, and the cabin was hers. Sight unseen. Her mother thought she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. Hours later, as city streets gave way to highways, and highways to winding country roads, Emma felt something in her chest loosen. The skyline expanded, buildings replaced by trees, billboards by open sky. She had never lived anywhere but the city. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, it offered a strange comfort. No one knew her here. No one would remember the Emma who had built her life around a man who could walk away so easily. The road narrowed, and the GPS signal flickered and died as the forest grew denser around her. By the time she finally spotted the battered rural mailbox, faded numbers matching her new address, the sun was sinking behind the trees, painting the overgrown lane in deep shadows. The cabin looked smaller than it had in the pictures, its gray, weathered planks blending into the encroaching twilight. Weeds grew waist-high around the porch steps, and several windows were boarded up. Emma sat in the car, a hand on her belly, suddenly questioning every single decision that had led her to this moment. "We can do this," she said aloud, though uncertainty made her voice tremble. Using her phone's flashlight, Emma made her way up the groaning porch steps. Fumbling with the key the realtor had mailed her, she pushed the door open. It swung inward with a protesting shriek, revealing the darkness beyond. The air that billowed out smelled of dust and disuse, tinged with something sweeter, herbs perhaps, or old wood. She found a light switch that, to her surprise, worked, illuminating a cluttered main room. The realtor hadn't exaggerated about the contents. Every surface was covered. Furniture draped in sheets, stacks of books, cardboard boxes, glass jars filled with unidentifiable items, and bundles of dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams. This wasn't the blank canvas she'd imagined for her new life, but a space already filled with someone else's existence. Emma picked her way carefully through the narrow paths between the piles, looking for a place to sit. She cleared off a rocking chair, sending dust swirling in the dim light, and sank into it with a sigh. The baby shifted, pressing against her ribs. "I know," she murmured. "Not exactly what I promised you, is it?" As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, Emma noticed a wooden drawer, partially open, in an old kitchen cabinet. Something compelled her to get up and investigate. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, was a collection of skeleton keys, old and ornate, with intricate patterns on their bows. They looked nothing like the modern house key the realtor had sent. These were older, belonging to a time when doors and chests held real secrets. Emma picked one up, feeling its substantial weight in her palm. It wouldn't fit any modern lock, yet there was something about it that felt important. As she held it, a sense of purpose flickered inside her. Faint, but undeniable. These keys opened something in this cabin, and whatever it was now hers to discover. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees that cradled her new home. For the first time since Michael left, Emma felt a faint glimmer of hope. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was possibility. A door waiting to be unlocked. Morning light streamed through the dirty windows, revealing the cabin in all its cluttered glory. Emma stood in the middle of the main room, hands on her hips, assessing the challenge before her. She needed to carve out a livable space in this chaos before the baby arrived. She started with the essentials, clearing a path to the bathroom, a space for her mattress, and a workable section of the kitchen. Every object she touched felt like an intrusion into another person's life. Faded photographs in tarnished frames revealed glimpses of a white-haired woman with kind eyes and a determined chin. The previous owner, she presumed. Emma set them carefully on a shelf rather than packing them away. "Hope you don't mind me making a few changes," she heard herself say to one particular photo, where the woman stood proudly beside a flourishing garden. By midday, Emma had managed to organize one corner of the main room. Her back ached and her feet were swollen in her sneakers. She sank into the rocking chair she'd cleared yesterday, allowing herself a moment's rest. The cabin had two other rooms, a small bedroom, and what looked like an office with a roll-top desk. The desk drew her in. Its wooden surface was coated in dust, but was otherwise tidy, and like the rest of the cabin, this space felt as if it had been deliberately left. as if its owner had just stepped out for a moment. Emma approached it hesitantly. The desk was locked, but she remembered the skeleton keys. On the third try, the lock turned with a satisfying click. The top rolled back, revealing neat stacks of faded, leather-bound ledgers. Opening the top volume, Emma found meticulous records of plantings, harvests, weather patterns, and profits. The handwriting was precise, slanting to the right in dark ink. April 6, 1982. Planted corn in the Northfield. High risk of frost. Covered seedlings. Each entry revealed a life governed by the seasons and the soil, the rhythms of a working farm. Emma traced the script with her fingertip, feeling a connection to this unknown woman through the press of pen on paper decades ago. The ledgers dated back to the 1970s, chronicling the life of someone named Margaret Sullivan, Emma's own last name. A coincidence, surely. Sullivan wasn't an uncommon name. Still, the discovery sent a strange shiver down her spine. She kept turning the pages, finding notes on herbal remedies mixed in with the farm records. Echinacea tincture prepared for the Johnson twins' colds. 3 drops in honeyed water, 3 times daily. A knock at the door startled Emma from her reading. She hadn't heard a car approach. On the porch stood an elderly man in weathered overalls, a straw hat clutched in his gnarled hands. "Pardon me," he said, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her pregnant belly. "Saw the car. Figured I ought to welcome the new neighbor." "I'm Emma," she said, suddenly conscious of her dusty clothes and unkempt hair. "Walter Kingsley, farm just down the road." His eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Used to help Margaret out with the heavy work around here. She was independent as they come, but some things a person shouldn't do alone." "Margaret Sullivan?" Emma asked. Walter nodded. "You're living in her place now. She was a fine woman. Helped bring half the kids in this town into the world, mine included. She was a midwife and a healer. Knew more about plants and their uses than anyone in the next 3 counties. Folks came from all over when the doctors couldn't help them." He glanced past Emma at the cluttered room. "Looks like you've got your hands full with her collections." "It's overwhelming," Emma admitted. "Margaret never threw anything away if it still had a use," Walter added. "And she found a use for just about everything. Now, I won't keep you. My wife's expecting me for dinner." Walter ambled off, promising to return if she needed a hand. Emma watched him disappear down the overgrown lane, then turned back to the desk and the ledgers. She spent the rest of the afternoon engrossed in Margaret's records, piecing together the life of the cabin's former owner. A woman who lived alone, yet seemed connected to everyone in the region. A healer who documented not just the output of her farm, but the rhythms of the community around her. Emma placed a hand on her belly as she read. For the first time since she'd arrived, the cabin felt less like a hideout and more like a place with a purpose. Margaret Sullivan had built something here, and now, somehow, the cabin had passed to another Sullivan. "Maybe we're right where we're supposed to be, after all," she whispered to her unborn child. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through the windows she'd cleaned the day before. Nearly a week had passed since her arrival, and slowly, the cabin was taking shape. She'd fallen into a routine. Mornings for heavy cleaning, afternoons for sorting through her finds, and evenings for reading Margaret's journals by lamplight. Today, she would tackle the far corner of the main room, a shadowy space piled high with furniture and boxes. The physical labor felt good, grounding her in the present when thoughts of the future threatened to overwhelm her. Her body, already changing daily with pregnancy, was growing stronger with the work. She started by moving a heavy oak dresser, sliding it inch by painstaking inch toward the wall. Behind it were more boxes and what looked like furniture covered by time-yellowed canvas tarps. Emma carefully pulled back the coverings, releasing a cloud of dust that made her sneeze. When it settled, she stood frozen, staring at what she had revealed. It was a handcrafted crib made of rich cherry wood, with smooth curves that spoke of decades of careful craftsmanship. The rockers were carved from single pieces of wood, their gentle arc promising a soothing motion. This was not factory-made, but shaped with love by someone who understood both wood and babies. Emma reached out, her fingers hovering just above the polished surface. Coincidence felt like too simple an explanation. First, the shared last name. Now, a perfectly preserved crib, exactly when she needed one. "This can't be real," she whispered. She knelt beside it, examining the joinery, the thoughtful details. A pattern of leaves had been carved along the headboard, so delicate it almost seemed to breathe. Beneath the cradle there was a small drawer, fitted so perfectly that she had almost missed it. Emma pulled it open and found a folded piece of paper inside. The note, written in the same sloped handwriting as the ledgers, said simply, "For the next Sullivan baby, may you rock in safety and love." Emma brought a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. The feeling of being watched, of being somehow expected, was overwhelming. This wasn't just an abandoned cradle. It had been preserved, protected, waiting for a purpose it was now ready to fulfill. She stood and left the cabin, needing air, needing space to process what she had found. Outside, the spring day was bright and clear. The meadow surrounding the cabin rippled with wildflowers and tall grasses. Emma walked until she found a sun-warmed rock to sit on. With her mind reeling, the rational explanation was that Margaret, childless, according to Walter, had prepared the cradle for some relative who never came to claim it. The shared surname had to be a coincidence. Perhaps Margaret knew other Sullivans in the area, distant relatives of Emma's family. Yet, rationality seemed flimsy against the weight of everything she had experienced since she'd arrived. The keys that opened locks she never knew existed, the ledgers, with their wealth of practical knowledge, and now, a lovingly crafted cradle with a note that felt as if it had been written directly to her. Emma pressed her palms against her stomach, feeling the flutter of movement within. "What do you think, little one? Is someone looking out for us? Or am I just desperate to believe we're not alone?" The baby kicked in response, a firm thud against her hand. That night, Emma made her decision. She brought the cradle into the clear space near where she slept, positioning it where the morning light would warm it. Then she began to clean it, gently removing decades of dust with a soft cloth, polishing the wood until it glowed. As she worked, she found herself speaking to Margaret, as if the former owner could hear her. "I don't know if this was meant for me, or if something bigger than both of us is happening here, but I'm grateful. I think we were meant to find this place." There was comfort in the idea that her panicked flight from Chicago, her impulsive purchase of the cabin, might be part of a larger pattern instead of a desperate act, that she might have been guided here, rather than simply running away. When the cradle gleamed in the lamplight, Emma ran a hand over the smooth wood one last time before settling into her makeshift bed. For the first time since Michael had left her, she felt a sense of rightness in the world, as if unseen hands were helping to shape her path forward. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet room. somehow certain her words were heard. The town of Millbrook consisted of a single main street, lined with brick buildings that had weathered a century of New England seasons. Emma parked in front of the medical clinic, a converted Victorian house with a discreet sign announcing Dr. Helen Chen, General Practice. Her appointment wasn't for another 15 minutes, but Emma had left early, unsure of the way. She had been at the cabin for nearly 2 weeks, leaving only for groceries at the general store 5 miles down the road. This was her first real foray into the community. The waiting room was empty except for an older receptionist who smiled warmly as Emma approached. "You must be Miss Sullivan. We don't get many new faces around here." "Is it that obvious?" Emma asked, signing the paperwork she was handed. "Small towns don't have many secrets," the woman replied. "Word travels fast when someone moves into Margaret's old place." Before Emma could respond, a door opened and an elegant Asian woman in her 50s appeared. "Emma Sullivan, I'm Dr. Chen. Please come in." The exam room was surprisingly modern, given the building's exterior. Dr. Chen reviewed Emma's medical records from Chicago while she checked her vitals. "Your blood pressure is a little elevated. How are you settling in at the cabin?" Dr. Chen asked, making notes on a chart. "It's an adjustment," Emma admitted. "There's so much to sort through." "Margaret was quite the collector," Dr. Chen said with a knowing smile. "I used to make house calls when her arthritis got bad. I never saw the place arranged the same way twice. She was always reorganizing, cataloging, preserving. I knew her well, as both a doctor and a friend. Margaret was special to this community." Dr. Chen helped Emma onto the examination table. "She actually delivered me before she retired from obstetrics. Everyone mentions she was a midwife," Emma said, shivering as the cold stethoscope touched her back. "The best. She bridged two worlds, traditional knowledge and modern medicine. I learned a great deal from her." Dr. Chen moved the stethoscope to Emma's rounded belly. "Is the father involved?" Emma tensed. "No." The doctor simply nodded, asking no more on the subject. "Your baby's heartbeat is strong. Everything seems to be on track for a delivery in about 12 weeks." After finishing the exam, Dr. Chen removed her gloves and sat on a stool opposite Emma. "Normally I wouldn't pry, but given your situation, new in town, living alone with a baby on the way, I feel I should ask if you have a plan for the birth." "I hadn't really thought that far ahead," Emma admitted. The future, beyond settling into the cabin, remained a frightening blank. "You have time, but it's something to consider. The hospital is a 40-minute drive in good weather." Dr. Chen hesitated. "You know, there's something almost poetic about you being in Margaret's cabin. She helped hundreds of women through their pregnancies and births over the years, many of them in situations very much like yours." "What do you mean?" "Alone. Starting over. Margaret had a way of finding the women who needed her most." Dr. Chen wrote out a prescription and handed it to Emma. "These are prenatal vitamins. And here," she scribbled on a notepad, "this is my personal number. Call anytime, day or night." On the drive back to the cabin, Emma's mind was buzzing with new information. Everyone she met seemed to have a story about Margaret. The woman's presence in the community felt almost mythical. Healer, midwife, wise woman. Back at the cabin, Emma noticed something she had overlooked during her cleaning. A wooden trunk tucked under a window seat. One of the master keys fit the lock perfectly. Inside was a medical bag, its leather worn and cracked with age. Beside it were neatly organized boxes of dried herbs, tinctures in small glass vials, and handwritten index cards with recipes and dosages. Emma picked up the cards, reading Margaret's precise instructions. For morning sickness, an infusion of ginger and chamomile. For back pain, a warm compress with lavender and arnica oil. Beneath the herbal preparations lay a cloth-wrapped bundle. Emma carefully unfolded it to reveal the tools of the midwife's trade: a wooden fetoscope, a measuring tape, shears with ornate handles. She ran her fingers over the worn fetoscope, imagining how many heartbeats it had detected, how many new lives Margaret had welcomed into the world with these simple tools. The connection she'd felt since finding the cradle deepened. Outside the window, Emma noticed for the first time that what she had dismissed as overgrown weeds behind the cabin had a pattern. Organized rows, now nearly invisible beneath seasons of neglect. Margaret's herb garden, overgrown, but still there. With a renewed sense of purpose, Emma gathered the vitamin prescription, Margaret's herbal cards, and a garden trowel she found in the shed. She might not know anything about herbs or gardening, but she could learn. Margaret's knowledge was right here, waiting to be rediscovered, just like the garden outside. Her hand rested on her belly as she walked toward the tangled patch of green. Let's see what else Margaret has to teach us. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder rolled through the valley. Emma stood at the kitchen sink, watching lightning illuminate the distant hills in brief, brilliant flashes. The storm had descended without warning, turning her planned work in the garden into an indoor day. 3 weeks in the cabin had settled her into a new rhythm. Each morning she explored another corner of Margaret's collections. Each evening she read more from the ledgers. In between, she cleared spaces, made repairs where she could, and slowly began reclaiming the herb garden from the wilderness. Today, however, the weather had other plans. The cabin creaked and groaned in the wind, its old timbers protesting the storm's fury. Emma found the sounds strangely comforting. The place had weathered countless storms like this, and would weather countless more. As she turned from the window, a steady drip caught her attention. Water was seeping from a corner of the ceiling, forming a small puddle on the wooden floor. Emma grabbed a pot from the kitchen and set it under the leak, then noticed the water had also stained the surrounding wood. Looking up, she saw a discolored square in the ceiling, a trap door to an attic she hadn't yet explored. Using a broom handle, Emma pushed at the ceiling panel, which swung open reluctantly. A wooden ladder unfolded with a groan. She hesitated, eyeing the narrow access and thinking of her growing belly. Then, carefully, she made her way up the steps. The attic was surprisingly spacious, running the full length of the cabin under a sloped roof, and, unlike the cluttered spaces below, it held only a few trunks and boxes, neatly arranged and labeled in faded ink. Emma pulled the chain on a single bare bulb, grateful the electricity was still working despite the storm. She moved between the trunks, reading the labels. Christmas, winter clothes, family papers. The last trunk, smaller than the others and tucked under the eaves, was unlabeled. It wasn't padlocked, but fastened with a tarnished hasp that gave way easily to her touch. Inside was an ornate wooden box, carved with interlocking roses and vines. Emma lifted it out carefully, surprised by its weight. The box was locked, with a delicate keyhole on the front. She retrieved the ring of master keys she now carried in her pocket, trying each one until a small brass key turned with a soft click. The lid opened to reveal bundles of letters tied with faded ribbons and a leather-bound journal. Emma's fingers hovered over them, suddenly hesitant. This wasn't ledgers or medical records, but personal correspondence, intimate thoughts never meant for her eyes. Yet something about the careful preservation, the placement in this otherwise organized attic, it made her wonder if Margaret had intended for them to be found. Emma selected the top bundle, untied the ribbon, and unfolded the first letter. It was dated June 1975, written in Margaret's now familiar hand. But the script was different, looser, younger, more urgent. Emma began to read. My dearest Thomas, by the time you receive this, I will be gone from Boston. Please do not try to find me. What's done is done, and your wife deserves better than the both of us. The child I carry is a burden I must bear alone. Emma caught her breath. She read on, discovering that a young Margaret Sullivan had fled an affair with a married man, determined to shield her unborn child from scandal. The letter was signed, but it had never been sent. Like all the others in the bundle, it was an outpouring of grief, anger, and finally, resilience, addressed to a man who would never read them. More letters followed, each chronicling another stage of Margaret's journey. The purchase of the cabin with inheritance money, the decision to become self-sufficient, the fear as her pregnancy advanced without medical care, the determination to build a life for herself and her child. The last letter in the bundle, dated nearly a year after the first, contained a single pressed flower and 4 simple lines. Thomas, she has your eyes. I have named her Grace. We are well. Goodbye. Emma carefully retied the ribbon around the letters and opened the journal. The first entry, dated a week after the last letter, read, Grace died today. She was born too soon, her lungs not ready for this world. I buried her under the oak tree at dawn. I feel hollowed out, an empty vessel. What purpose is left for me now? Tears blurred Emma's vision. She closed the journal, overwhelmed by the depth of Margaret's loss, by the staggering parallels to her own situation. Outside, the storm raged on, but Emma barely heard it. She cradled her belly protectively, whispering nonsensical words of comfort to her unborn child. That night, as the rain continued its rhythmic drumming on the roof, Emma dreamed of a woman with kind eyes and a determined chin, standing in an herb garden full of summer blossoms, beckoning for her to come closer. The morning sun illuminated the patch of earth Emma had been clearing for days. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world of mud and a renewed sense of resolve. Ever since discovering Margaret's letters, Emma had felt a deeper connection to the cabin and its former owner, a woman who had faced similar circumstances, but with a far more tragic outcome. I won't let that happen, Emma whispered, one hand resting on her belly as she surveyed the overgrown garden. We're going to thrive here. With the sketches of Margaret's herb garden from the ledgers as her guide, Emma began to reclaim the rectangular plot behind the cabin. What had looked like a random wilderness revealed itself to be a carefully planned space, long since surrendered to nature. Beneath the tangle of weeds, raised beds formed a geometric pattern, their wooden borders rotted but still visible. Emma worked methodically, clearing one small section at a time, careful not to overexert herself. The physical labor felt purposeful, connecting her to the land in a way her city life never had. Each evening, she consulted Margaret's notes, learning the names and uses of plants she had never seen before. The discovery came mid-morning, as she was digging around what looked like a stone birdbath. Her shovel struck something solid buried in the soil. Carefully clearing away the earth, Emma uncovered a flat stone with a metal ring set into it. She pulled on the ring, and the stone lifted away to reveal a small, brick-lined subterranean chamber, a perfectly preserved root cellar. Inside sat a wooden box with a hinged lid, sealed against the damp with wax. Emma lifted it out, surprised by its weight, and carried it to the porch where she could examine it in the better light. The wax seal crumbled easily beneath her fingers. Inside, dozens of small packets and glass vials were nestled in straw, each meticulously labeled in Margaret's cursive script. Chamomile, harvested at the full moon, August 1995. Lavender, summer solstice, 1996. Echinacea root, first frost, 1994. Seeds. Margaret had preserved seeds from her garden, storing them underground, where the temperature remained constant. Emma carefully opened one packet, tipping a few minuscule seeds into her palm. Could they still be viable after all these years? Beneath the seed packets lay a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with planting instructions. Margaret had mapped the garden according to the principles of companion planting, noting which herbs thrived together and which needed to be kept apart. She had included lunar planting guides, harvest times, and methods for preservation. It was a complete compendium of herbal knowledge. "Emma Sullivan, I figured that might be you." The voice startled her. An elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a bun stood at the edge of the garden, leaning on a walking stick. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you approach," Emma said, rising awkwardly with a hand to her lower back. "Didn't mean to scare you, dear. I'm Iris Blackwood. I was a friend of Margaret's." The woman's eyes crinkled as she smiled. "Walter mentioned someone had moved in. Thought I'd come see for myself." "Would you like some tea?" Emma offered, suddenly eager for company. On the porch, Iris examined the seed box with practiced hands. "Margaret's treasure," she said softly. "She always said these seeds were her insurance policy. No matter what happened, she could always start again if she had these. Do you think they'll still grow?" "Some might. Seeds can be incredibly resilient when they're stored right, and Margaret knew what she was doing." Iris traced the garden map in the notebook with her finger. "I recognize this layout. I helped her plant it, nearly 30 years ago, after her recovery." "Recovery?" Iris's expression softened. "After she lost the baby, Margaret was hollowed out by grief. For months, she barely spoke, barely ate. Then spring came and she started digging. She said the garden would be her legacy, since she wasn't going to have a child." Emma's hand moved instinctively to her own belly. "I found her letters," she admitted. "About the baby. About Thomas." "You knew about that?" "Margaret never spoke of him to anyone but me, as far as I know." Iris took a thoughtful sip of her tea. "Some losses are too deep to be shared casually." They sat in companionable silence, watching the bees investigate the few flowers already blooming among the weeds. Finally, Iris spoke again. "It's fitting, you know, you being here in your condition. Because we share the same last name?" Iris looked genuinely surprised. "No, I meant because you're bringing new life to a place that lost its chance before." She paused. "But the name? That is a real curiosity." As Iris prepared to leave, she pointed to a section of the garden Emma hadn't reached yet. "You should try the moonflower seeds. They bloom at night, glowing like little lanterns. Margaret always said they reminded her that beauty can come from the darkness." Emma spent the rest of the day sorting the seed collection, setting aside those that might still grow, and organizing them according to Margaret's planting chart. The work filled her with purpose. This garden had healed Margaret's spirit once. Perhaps it could strengthen Emma's, too. That evening, she planted a small patch with moonflower seeds from the subterranean cache, gently patting the soil over them as the stars appeared in the darkening sky. The Millbrook Public Library occupied the ground floor of what had once been someone's grand home, its brick facade softened by climbing roses. Emma parked under a towering oak and walked up the stone steps, grateful for a destination that promised air conditioning. June had arrived with an unexpected heat that made her pregnancy increasingly uncomfortable. Inside, the temperature was blissfully cool. Emma wandered the stacks, running her fingers along the spines of books, breathing in the comforting scent of old paper and binder's glue. She had come looking for gardening references, maybe some information on local history, but mostly, she was seeking a brief reprieve from the cabin's isolation. "Can I help you find something?" Emma turned to see a woman about her own age, with curly auburn hair and glasses on a chain. Her name tag read, Amelia Davis, Head Librarian. "I'm looking for information on medicinal herbs," Emma explained, "and maybe some local history." "You must be the woman staying at Margaret Sullivan's cabin," Amelia said, her expression keen with interest. "News travels fast around here," Emma said with a wry smile. Amelia led her to a glass-fronted cabinet in the local history section. Most of what we have on traditional herbal medicine came from Margaret herself. She donated her reference collection when her eyesight started to fail. The cabinet held leather-bound volumes on botanical medicine, some dating back to the 19th century. Emma gazed at them in awe, realizing they must have guided Margaret's work as a healer. "She was an important figure in this town, wasn't she?" Emma asked. "Margaret was the mainstay of Millbrook for half a century." Amelia unlocked the cabinet and carefully removed a large binder. "This might interest you more than the technical references." The binder held a community cookbook, its cover faded and its pages stained, proof of real use. The Millbrook Women's Auxiliary Cookbook. Underneath, the name Anne Exotifime was printed on the cover. Amelia flipped through the pages until she found the section on herbal remedies. A dozen pages were dedicated to traditional cures, with Margaret Sullivan listed as the contributor. Recipes for tinctures, salves, teas, and poultices filled the section, each with specific applications for joint inflammation, persistent coughs, and female complaints. Handwritten notes in various scripts surrounded the printed text. "This saved my James during the flu epidemic." Margaret's burn salve healed Elisa's hand when the hospital gave up hope. "Used this during my Sarah's difficult labor. Eternally grateful." "The original is a real community treasure," Amelia said. "These are photocopies. The actual pages are too fragile for regular handling, but all the notes are there." Emma studied a page describing a tea for morning sickness, recognizing ingredients she had found in Margaret's garden. "Can I get a copy of these pages?" "Better yet, take this." Amelia handed her a bound reproduction of the entire cookbook. "The Historical Society sells them to raise funds. Consider it a welcome gift." While Emma continued to browse, Amelia helped an elderly couple with a genealogical search. The quiet hum of library activity enveloped her. Whispered conversations, turning pages, the soft click of computer keys. After weeks of isolation, the simple presence of other people felt both strange and comforting. At the checkout desk, Emma noticed a flyer for a community potluck that weekend. Amelia saw her looking. "You should go," she said, stamping the gardening books Emma had chosen. "It's a good way to meet people." "I'm not sure I'd fit in," Emma said, unconsciously placing a hand over her belly. Amelia's smile was kind and understanding. Millbrook isn't as judgmental as you might think. Margaret taught us better than that. Emma hesitated, then nodded. Maybe I will. Back at the cabin, Emma spent the evening reading the community cookbook, particularly the sections attributed to Margaret. The recipes revealed a practical wisdom about plants and healing, but also about community. Margaret had not practiced her art in isolation. She had shared her knowledge freely, ensuring it would outlive her. One entry in particular caught Emma's eye: a recipe for elderberry syrup meant to fortify the blood of expectant mothers. The accompanying note read, "First made for Iris during her difficult time. A spoonful a day through the winter keeps mother and child robust." Emma remembered Iris mentioning that she had helped Margaret plant the garden after her recovery. Had Iris also endured a difficult pregnancy, with Margaret helping her through it? The interconnectedness of these women's lives fascinated her. That night, Emma made a decision. She would go to the community potluck, and she would bring something cardamom with herbs from Margaret's garden, a small gesture of connection to the community that had been Margaret's home, and was now, however temporarily, her own. She fell asleep with the cookbook beside her, her dreams filled with women from different eras, sharing recipes around a kitchen table, their voices blending into one continuous thread of knowledge passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. The community potluck had been surprisingly pleasant. Emma brought a simple herb bread with rosemary and thyme from Margaret's garden, expecting polite distance from the townspeople. Instead, she was met with genuine warmth, introduced by Amelia as the new Sullivan at Margaret's place. Several older women shared stories of Margaret's healing touch during their own pregnancies, while others offered practical advice for Emma's delivery. She returned to the cabin feeling less like an outsider, a fragile connection to the community beginning to form. Margaret's legacy, perhaps, extended beyond herbs and remedies into a resilient spirit the town still honored. Emma spent the next morning rearranging the office, a room with good light and a peaceful feel, a potential nursery once it was properly cleared out. The roll-top desk dominated the space, its many cubbyholes now organized with her own papers alongside Margaret's journals, which she was reading through slowly. As she moved a heavy bookcase to sweep behind it, Emma noticed something odd about the wall. A slight discrepancy in the wood paneling, a faint seam visible where dust had settled differently. She ran her fingers along the edge and felt a draft, a hidden door, set into the paneling, so expertly crafted it was nearly invisible unless you stood at just the right angle. Emma's heart quickened. She had tried every door in the cabin, opened every conventional storage space. This was something else, something deliberately concealed. She examined the seam more closely, finding no handle, no obvious way to open it. The skeleton keys. Emma retrieved them from the kitchen drawer where she kept them, studying each one again. Most had already been matched to various locks around the cabin, but a few remained a mystery. Old, ornate things with intricate patterns. It took her 3 tries to find the right one. A small brass key with a clover-shaped head slid perfectly into what looked like a pinprick of a keyhole in the wood paneling. The door sighed open inward, revealing darkness beyond. Emma fumbled for her phone, switching on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a small room, perhaps 2.5 meters square. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars, boxes, and books. In the center stood a curious wooden chair with a curved seat and arms, worn smooth by countless hands. A birthing chair. Emma recognized it from the illustrations in Margaret's midwifery books. She stepped inside, feeling as though she had crossed a threshold more significant than the physical doorway. This hidden room had been Margaret's sanctuary, a place where she practiced her art of bringing new life into the world. The shelves held specialized tools, herbal preparations specific to childbirth, and handwritten journals distinct from the farm's ledgers. Emma opened one and read Margaret's meticulous documentation of the births she had attended. June 12, 1981. Catherine Mitchell delivered a baby girl after 14 hours of labor, eased with red raspberry leaf tea and counterpressure. Mother and daughter well. November 3, 1982. Attended the difficult birth of Josephine Wilson. Transverse lie corrected with external manipulation. Healthy boy born after 22 hours. Used blue cohosh tincture to strengthen contractions. Dozens of journals, hundreds of births, a lifetime of women supported in their most vulnerable moments. Emma sat in the birthing chair, trying to imagine the scenes that had unfolded in this small, sacred space. How many first cries had echoed off these walls? How many mothers had gripped these smooth wooden arms as they brought forth new life? An entry caught her eye, dated shortly after the letters about baby Grace. April 17, 1976. Attended the birth of Marta Kingsley, a boy born after a brief labor. As I placed him in his mother's arms, I felt my Grace beside me, guiding my hands. I understand now. This is my purpose. Not to have children of my own, but to help others bring theirs safely into the world. In every birth, I find healing. Emma wiped away tears. Margaret had transformed profound loss into purpose, channeling her grief into a life dedicated to serving other mothers. The hidden room was not a shrine to what she had lost, but a testament to what she had found, her calling. With a new sense of reverence, Emma examined the room's contents more carefully. The shelves held neatly organized supplies, clean linens, herbal preparations, tools that bridged traditional and modern midwifery. Everything a skilled midwife would need, arranged for efficient access during the intensity of labor. As the afternoon light faded, Emma made a decision. This room, with its deep history of birth, would be where she herself would give birth. She would clean it thoroughly, update what needed modernizing, but preserve its essential character. The circle would continue. Another Sullivan would bring life into the world in this space dedicated to that sacred purpose. Emma began to clear away the cobwebs, her movements deliberate and respectful. This wasn't just a preparation for her own delivery. It was the restoration of something precious. Margaret's legacy of supporting women through their most transformative experiences. Emma awoke to a sharp pain radiating across her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her rounded belly as the sensation intensified and then gradually subsided. The bedside clock read 2:17 a.m. Too soon. Far too soon. She lay still, counting her breaths, waiting. 5 minutes later, another wave of pain washed over her. These were not practice contractions. These felt different, more urgent, more dangerous. Not yet, she whispered fiercely to her unborn child. We still have 6 weeks. Emma fumbled for her phone in the darkness. No signal. The storm that had rolled in at dusk must have knocked out the already unreliable cell service. She swung her legs out of bed, wincing as another contraction gripped her, and made her way to the landline in the kitchen. She'd had it installed just last week, finally heeding Dr. Chen's warnings about her rural isolation. Emma walked carefully down the hall, one hand braced against the wall for support. The old rotary phone sat silent on the counter. She lifted the receiver, waiting for a dial tone. Nothing. The lines were down from the storm. Of course. The pain returned, bringing Emma to her knees. She wrapped her arms around her belly, feeling terror rise in her throat. Too early, too isolated, and no way to call for help. Her car. She could try to drive to town, to the clinic, to anywhere with a working phone. Emma struggled to her feet and grabbed the keys from the hook by the door. The rain was a torrential downpour, hammering on the cabin's tin roof. She threw on a slicker and stepped onto the porch. Her car sat in the clearing, a ghost in the driving rain. Emma descended the steps carefully, one hand shielding her belly. Halfway to the vehicle, another contraction hit, sharper than the last. She doubled over, waiting for it to pass before pressing on. The key turned in the ignition, but the engine only clicked, defeated by weeks of disuse and the damp weather. Emma tried again and again, her desperation mounting with each failed attempt. The battery was dead. Another contraction seized her, and with it came a frightening clarity. She was alone, in labor, with no way to call for help. Somehow, she managed to get back inside the cabin, soaked and shivering. In the bathroom, she examined herself with trembling hands. There was no blood, but the contractions were coming regularly now, far too regularly for 6 weeks early. Think, she commanded herself aloud. What would Margaret do? The hidden room, the birthing supplies, the journals. Emma lit the kerosene lamps she kept ready for power outages and made her way to the study. The hidden door yielded to the key, revealing the birthing room she had been so carefully restoring. She scanned Margaret's midwifery journals with desperate focus, searching for entries on premature labor. There, in a journal from the late 80s, Margaret described attending a woman who went into labor at 34 weeks. Administered black haw tincture to quiet the uterus, a dropperful every hour until the contractions subsided. The mother remained on bed rest. The pregnancy continued to term. Emma remembered seeing it among the preparations, labeled in Margaret's medical chest. She found the small amber bottle, reading Margaret's precise handwriting on the label. For threatened miscarriage and premature labor, quiets the uterus. Following the dosage from the journal, Emma placed a dropperful of the bitter liquid under her tongue. Then, she arranged pillows on the small cot she had moved into the birthing room and lay down, focusing on slow, deep breaths between the contractions. An hour passed. The contractions continued, but they seemed less intense. She took another dose of the tincture. Outside, rain lashed the windows, and thunder shook the cabin's frame. Emma felt strangely calm now, as if the rhythm of the storm matched the rhythms of her own body, steadying her. By dawn, the contractions had subsided to occasional twinges. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight filtered through the windows. Emma remained on the cot, unwilling to move, afraid the labor might start again. Her hand brushed against a leather-bound volume she didn't recognize, tucked between the mattress and the wall. Another of Margaret's journals. This one more personal than the clinical records. Emma opened it carefully. The entry was dated 40 years earlier. 3 days of false labor. Terrified, alone, I used the black haw as my mother taught me. I've survived it. The baby still moves strongly. I speak to her constantly now, telling her to stay safe inside until the time is right. I have named her Grace. Emma held her breath. This journal predated the letters she had found, written during Margaret's pregnancy. The similarity of their experiences was chilling. Both of them alone, both facing premature labor in this very cabin. But while Emma had Margaret's wisdom to guide her, Margaret had faced her crisis truly alone. And Margaret's story had ended in tragedy, while Emma's was still unfolding. "We're going to have a different ending," Emma whispered, moving her hand in slow circles over her belly. "Margaret is showing us the way." The baby stirred beneath her palm, a reassuring flutter that brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes. They had survived the night. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with Margaret's legacy as their guide. The knock on the door came as Emma was hanging herbs to dry in the kitchen. 3 days of strict bed rest after the premature labor scare had passed without further incident, but she remained cautious, moving slowly and resting often. She opened the door to find Iris Blackwood on the porch, a canvas tote slung over her arm. The older woman's sharp eyes took in Emma's pale face. "Walter mentioned seeing your car with the hood up. Figured you might need some groceries." Iris held up the bag. "Nothing fancy. Just some bread I baked this morning, fresh eggs from my hens, and a jar of last summer's blackberry jam." "That's incredibly kind," Emma said, stepping back to let her in. "My supplies were getting low." "I figured. Storms like that can leave us cut off for days out here." Iris looked around the kitchen. "You've made good progress, getting things in order. Margaret would be pleased." Emma filled the kettle for tea, her movements deliberately unhurried. "I had a scare during the storm," she admitted. "Early contractions. I used Margaret's Black Haw tincture." Iris nodded in approval. "Smart girl. That remedy saved more than one baby in these parts, including my Sarah. I threatened to go into labor at 7 months. Margaret kept me pregnant for another 6 weeks with her herbs and strict instructions." Iris smiled at the memory. She could be quite the taskmaster when a mother and baby were at risk. As they settled at the kitchen table, with steaming mugs, Iris placed a worn, leather-bound album between them. "I thought you might like to see these. Photos of Margaret, through the years." Emma opened the album with reverence. The first few pages showed a young woman, recognizable as Margaret by the line of her jaw and her intelligent eyes, but without the silver hair and weathered lines Emma knew from the photos in the cabin. This Margaret stood beside a newly built porch on the very cabin Emma now occupied, pride evident in her posture. "That was right after she arrived," Iris explained. "Spring of '75. She was about your age, maybe a little younger." Emma turned the pages, watching Margaret age through the decades. The initial photos showed her alone or with Iris, then gradually with more members of the community. There she was in a garden overflowing with herbs, in a kitchen with canning jars lined up on the walls, at a town meeting receiving some kind of award. "There she is, helping deliver my Sarah in 1980, Iris said, pointing to a photo of Margaret holding a newborn beside a much younger Iris in a hospital bed. "After she got me through those rough months, she was the only one I wanted with me when the time came. The doctors didn't approve, but Margaret had a way of making herself indispensable. By then, half the county considered her their backup doctor." "How did she learn it all?" Emma asked. "The herbs, the midwifery skills, all of it. She was always studying, but she came with knowledge too. Her grandmother was a healer, from the old country. They called Margaret the heir to the legacy." Iris tapped a photo of Margaret standing proudly beside a young woman in a doctor's coat. "That's Helen Chen at her medical school graduation. Margaret paid her way through, said the future needed healers with a foot in both worlds. Dr. Chen mentioned Margaret delivered her, you know, among hundreds of others. After losing her own baby, she became completely dedicated to helping other women deliver safely." Iris turned to a page showing Margaret in her 60s, surrounded by a group of women of all ages. This was taken on her 70th birthday. Every woman there had either been delivered by Margaret or had a child delivered by her. The final pages showed an elderly Margaret, her back still straight and her eyes clear despite her advanced age. In the last photo, she was sitting in her garden, her silver hair shining in the sun, a smile of quiet satisfaction on her lined face. "When did she pass?" Emma asked softly. "3 years ago, in June, peacefully, in her sleep, right here in the cabin. She was 94. Iris closed the album gently. She left instructions about the cabin. Said it was to go to someone who needed its protection, same as I once did. The lawyer had assumed she was referring to a young family, but nothing had ever seemed quite right. Until you. A lump formed in Emma's throat. I found letters about her pregnancy, about losing Grace. She rarely spoke of that time, even to me. It was too painful. Iris reached across the table and patted Emma's hand. But I think she would be happy, seeing new life preparing to enter the world here. As Iris prepared to leave, she paused in the doorway. The community is smaller than it once was. The young people move away. The old ones pass on. But those of us who remain, we remember what Margaret did for this place. You're connecting to something bigger than you know by living here. After Iris had gone, Emma returned to the scrapbook, studying the arc of Margaret's life. The transformation was remarkable. From a solitary young woman shattered by grief to a central figure in a community that clearly adored her. You made something beautiful from broken pieces, Emma whispered to the photographs. Show me how. The July heat shimmered above the meadow grasses surrounding the cabin. Emma stood on the porch, observing the property with new eyes. Nearly 2 months had passed since her arrival, and with each day, the cabin felt less like a temporary refuge and more like a home. Her gaze settled on a small outbuilding, partially hidden by overgrown lilac bushes. She'd noticed it before but had assumed it was a storage shed or a root cellar. Now, her curiosity piqued. She carefully descended the porch steps, mindful of her body's growing awkwardness. The padlock on the shed door was rusted, but it yielded to one of Margaret's master keys. Emma pushed the door open, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. Dust motes danced in the single sunbeam slicing through a small window, illuminating what was clearly no ordinary shed. A workbench ran the length of one wall, its surface scarred by decades of use. Above it hung an orderly array of tools, hand planes, chisels, and saws of various sizes, all meticulously kept. The opposite wall held shelves lined with jars of stains and varnishes, rolls of leather stripping, and blocks of wood in various stages of transformation. But it was the center of the room that captured Emma's attention. Draped in canvas cloths stood what appeared to be pieces of furniture. She pulled back the nearest cloth to reveal a child's rocking chair, perfectly proportioned and smoothly finished, waiting only for a cushion. Another cloth concealed a wooden toy chest with woodland creatures carved in bas-relief across its front. A third covered a set of nesting blocks with letters and animals etched into each face. Margaret had been a woodworker, and not just of utilitarian pieces. These were objects of beauty, crafted specifically for children. Emma ran her fingers over the smooth arm of the rocking chair, marveling at the precision of the joinery, the absence of any nails or screws. Each piece had been shaped to fit perfectly with the next, then secured with wooden pegs. On a smaller bench in the corner, she found an unfinished project. a mobile of partially carved woodland creatures: a fox, a rabbit, an owl, and a deer. The fox and the owl were complete, their features delicately rendered. The rabbit was missing its ears, and the deer was only a rough outline. Beside the figures lay Margaret's tools, as if she had just set them down mid-task. A fine layer of dust coated everything, untouched since Margaret's hands had last held them. "She made her living with this," a voice said from the doorway. Emma turned to see Walter Kingsley, hat in hand as always. "Sorry to intrude," he said. "Iris mentioned you were doing better after that scare. Thought I'd check on your car battery." "That's very kind," Emma said, motioning him inside. "I had no idea Margaret was so gifted." "It started as therapy after she lost the baby," Walter explained, his eyes on the unfinished pieces of the mobile. "The doctor suggested working with her hands might help with the grief. She took to it, had a gift for the wood, knew how to draw out what was hidden inside." "Did she sell these?" "Word got around about the quality of her work. She took commissions from all over, even from the city, mostly for new babies, special occasions." Walter picked up the unfinished deer. This would have been her last project. Seems fitting it wasn't completed, as if she left something for the next caretaker to finish. Emma studied the careful work of the completed pieces. "I wouldn't know where to begin." "She kept pattern books," Walter said, gesturing to a shelf above the main workbench. "Detailed drawings of everything she ever made with notes on technique." Margaret believed in passing knowledge on. After Walter left with a promise to return with a new car battery, Emma spent hours in the workshop, poring over Margaret's pattern books. Each project was meticulously documented: materials, techniques, even the time required for each step. Notes in the margins revealed her thought process. Softer curve needed for small hands. Remember to carve with the grain, not against it. Emma found herself drawn back to the unfinished mobile. Examining the partly completed animals, the owl's eyes seemed to watch her with an ancient wisdom. The fox wore a slight, knowing smile, as if privy to some forest secret. Without a conscious decision, she found herself sitting on the workshop stool, picking up a small whittling knife and testing its balance in her hand. The wood felt warm, somehow alive, as she positioned the rough form of the deer and began to tentatively shape it, following Margaret's pattern. Time slipped away as she worked, lost in the task. When she finally looked up, the afternoon was waning, and the deer was beginning to emerge from the formless block. Not with Margaret's skill, certainly, but recognizable as a deer nonetheless. Something settled in Emma as she carefully swept the wood shavings into a pile. This workshop was another facet of Margaret's resilience, her ability to create beauty from raw material, to shape something lasting with her own two hands. Emma placed the deer back with its companions, a sense of accomplishment warming her. She would come back tomorrow, and the day after, and slowly bring Margaret's final project to completion. It felt like the right thing to do, not just to honor Margaret's craft, but to continue it, to become part of its lineage. The child inside her gave a vigorous kick, as if in agreement. The black sedan looked out of place in the cabin's rutted driveway, its polished surface reflecting the August sun. Emma watched from the porch as a man in a suit got out, a briefcase in his hand. City clothes, city car. He stood out against the wild meadow grass like a penguin in a flower garden. "Ms. Sullivan," he called, walking carefully toward the cabin, wincing as grasshoppers scattered from his polished shoes. "Yes?" Emma shifted her weight, one hand on the small of her back. At 8 months pregnant, every movement required conscious adjustment. Lawrence Winters, from Winters and Blackwood Legal Services. He extended a hand. Do you have a moment to talk? Emma led him inside to the kitchen, where the windows were open to the summer breeze. She poured him a glass of lemonade made from Margaret's recipe, tart with lemon, sweet with honey, and cooled with fresh mint. Lawrence sat at the table looking strangely formal amidst the cabin's rustic simplicity. He drew a folder from his briefcase. My apologies for not contacting you sooner. I was abroad on an estate matter and only recently learned of your purchase of the Sullivan property. Is there a problem with the sale? Emma's hands instinctively went to her belly, as if to shield her child from potential upheaval. No, no, quite the opposite. Lawrence opened the folder. I'm here because there are aspects of Margaret Sullivan's wishes concerning this property that were not fully executed. The real estate agent handled the basic transaction, but he wasn't privy to certain particulars. He slid a document across the table, dense with legal language, bearing official seals and Margaret's fluid signature at the bottom. This is Margaret's last will and testament, Lawrence explained. She was quite specific about this property. It was to be sold, yes, but not to just anyone. Her instructions were that it was to go to a mother in need, someone for whom this place could be a sanctuary, as it was for me. Emma's throat tightened. How would the real estate agent ever know that? That's where it gets interesting, Lawrence said gently. Margaret didn't leave it to chance. She set up a trust to maintain the property until the right buyer appeared. The trustee, my partner, Iris Blackwood, was given considerable latitude to identify that person. Iris Blackwood, the Iris who lives down the road? Margaret's oldest friend, and my law partner for 30 years, yes. She's technically retired now, but she stays active in certain matters, including yours, it would seem. It all clicked into place for Emma. Her chance discovery of the cabin's listing, the surprisingly affordable price, the smooth and rapid sale, none of it had been a coincidence. Iris, she led me here. Lawrence nodded. She has a knack for these things. When the realtor mentioned a pregnant woman looking for a rural property, Iris made sure the listing found its way to you. She said she knew right away that you were the one Margaret had been waiting for. But why? She didn't know me. We'd never met. I can't speak to that. Lawrence pulled another document from his folder. What I can tell you is that there is an additional component to your purchase. Margaret left a trust fund designated to maintain the property, cover taxes, and provide for improvements. As the qualifying buyer, you are now the beneficiary of that fund. Emma stared at the paper he handed her, the numbers blurring through a sudden film of tears. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to repair the cabin properly. Enough to live on, modestly, while she decided on her next steps. Enough to give her child a stable start. There's one more thing. Lawrence reached into his briefcase and took out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Margaret left this for whoever purchased the cabin under the terms of the trust. Emma took the envelope with a trembling hand. Her name wasn't on it. Only for the next caretaker, written in Margaret's distinctive script. The seal was wax, impressed with what looked like a sprig of herbs. I'll leave you to read it in private, Lawrence said, gathering his things. The trust documents will require your signature, but that can wait. Call my office when you're ready to discuss the details. After he left, Emma sat motionless at the kitchen table, the envelope before her. Outside, goldfinches flitted among the yellow coneflowers she had planted from seeds Margaret had saved. The cabin creaked softly in the summer heat. a living presence, a witness to this moment. Finally, she broke the seal and unfolded a single page of Margaret's flowing script. To whoever comes next. If you are reading this, you have been chosen. Not by me alone, but by the force that weaves the threads of our lives. This place saved me when I had nothing. It taught me strength and patience and purpose. It holds wisdom in its walls and healing in its soil. The key you needed most was not the one that opened this door, but the understanding that some sanctuaries find us when we need them most. Some legacies choose their bearers. Some wounds become the wellspring of compassion. Take care of this place, and it will take care of you. Listen to its language, learn its lessons, then pass on its gifts in your own way. As I did, with hope for your journey. Margaret Sullivan. Emma pressed the letter to her chest, no longer questioning the strange resonance she had felt since the day she arrived. It wasn't chance or coincidence. It was an inheritance, not just of property, but of purpose. The September morning brought a crispness to the air that hinted at the coming autumn. Emma sat in Dr. Chen's office, hands clasped over her now prominent belly, waiting for the doctor to return with her test results. The door opened and Dr. Chen came in, a tablet in her hand. Everything looks perfect, Emma. Blood pressure is normal. Iron levels are good. Baby's measurements are right on track. You've done an excellent job taking care of yourself. I've had help, Emma said, thinking of Margaret's herbal teas and the fresh vegetables from the garden she'd managed to restore. We're looking at about 4 weeks until your due date, Dr. Chen said, pulling up a chair. Have you decided on a birth plan? The hospital in Burlington is excellent, but it's a 45-minute drive in good conditions. Emma took a deep breath. I wanted to talk to you about that. I'm thinking of having the baby at home, in the cabin. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained neutral. Any particular reason? I've been preparing Margaret's birthing room, Emma said. Somehow it feels right, like this is where this baby is meant to be born. Instead of the objection Emma expected, Dr. Chen simply nodded, her expression thoughtful. Margaret helped bring hundreds of babies into the world in that room, including me. It has a certain energy. She tapped the tablet screen. But I have to advise you as your doctor. A first pregnancy can be unpredictable. The cabin is isolated, especially if the weather turns. I understand the risks, Emma said, but I also understand what that room means, what Margaret built there. I've read her journals, the birth records. I feel connected to something bigger than myself when I'm in that space. Dr. Chen watched her for a long moment. You're like her, you know, that same quiet certainty. She set the tablet down. I won't try to talk you out of it, but I will insist on a few precautions. Carolyn Wesley is a certified nurse midwife in town. If she agrees to attend you, and if you'll allow me to be on call as backup, I'll support your decision. A wave of relief washed over Emma. Thank you. That means so much to me. Margaret would haunt me if I didn't, Dr. Chen said with a smile. Now, let's talk about practical preparations. On the way home, Emma's mind buzzed with Dr. Chen's instructions and recommendations. The decision felt monumental, yet utterly right. Her child would enter the world in the same sacred space where Margaret had helped so many others begin their lives. At the cabin, Emma went straight to the birthing room. Over the past few weeks, she had meticulously cleaned everything. She replaced the old mattress on the birthing bed and washed and ironed the linens she'd found in the cedar chests. Margaret's instruments were sterilized, though Emma doubted they would be used. Carolyn would bring modern equipment. Still, there was more to prepare. Emma consulted Margaret's birthing journals, noting the supplies kept on hand for every delivery. Some were practical: clean towels, heating pads, ice chips. Others reflected Margaret's holistic approach: specific herbs for tea during labor, essential oils for massage, beeswax candles for soft lighting. As Emma was making her list, a knock came at the front door. She opened it to find Iris holding a large wicker basket. "Figured you'd be nesting," Iris said, stepping inside. "Every mother needs the proper supplies." The basket was filled with hand-knitted baby blankets, tiny caps, and booties. Beneath them sat a hinged wooden box. Emma recognized it instantly from photos in Margaret's journals. Her emergency kit, always prepared for every birth. "Margaret's birthing kit," Emma whispered, opening it carefully. Inside, compartments were sectioned off for everything a midwife might need: scissors, forceps, a bulb syringe, gauze, herbs, tinctures. Most of the spaces were empty now, the original supplies long since used or deteriorated, but the structure remained. "I used this at hundreds of births," Iris said, running a finger over the worn wood. "Margaret designed it herself, said every tool needed its place, ready in an instant when it was needed." "It's perfect," Emma said. "I'll show it to Carolyn when she comes for our consultation tomorrow." "The women have been gathering supplies," Iris mentioned casually. "It's tradition. When someone's having a home birth, everyone contributes what they can." "Women? What women?" "The ones Margaret helped bring into the world. Their mothers, their grandmothers. Her circle of care runs deep in this community." Iris smiled at Emma's surprise. "Did you think you were doing this alone? That's not how things work around here." That night, Emma began to fill Margaret's birthing kit with the modern supplies Dr. Chen had recommended, each in its proper compartment. As she worked, she felt a profound sense of continuity, her hands performing the same preparations Margaret had made countless times before. On the workshop bench sat the now completed mobile. The wooden animals, carved and sanded smooth, were balanced perfectly to turn in the slightest breeze. Emma had finished it the week before, her inexperienced hands guided by Margaret's book of patterns. It would hang above the crib, the first thing her child would see in this world. "We're almost ready," she whispered to her unborn child. "Just a little longer." The baby kicked in response, a strong, healthy movement that made Emma smile. As fragile as Margaret's Grace had been, this child grew sturdy and vigorous within her. They would write a new story in this place, not to erase Margaret's tragedy, but to honor her legacy, bringing back the life and joy she had helped others find to a place that had known such sorrow. The October wind howled around the cabin's eaves, rattling the windows in their frames. Emma moved from room to room, checking that everything was secure. The weather service had issued alerts for an approaching nor'easter, predicting heavy rain, high winds, and possible power outages across New England. "Just what we need, less than a week from your due date," Emma murmured to her belly. The baby answered with a series of kicks and rolls that had become familiar, active in the evenings, as if preparing for the imminent meeting. Carolyn, the midwife, had visited that morning before the weather worsened. "Everything looks perfect," she had reassured Emma. "The baby's in position. Your body is ready. It could be any time now." She had left reluctantly, promising to return as soon as Emma called. Storm or no storm, Emma spent the afternoon making final preparations, filling the bathtub with water in case the well pump lost power, setting out candles and flashlights, and making sure her cell phone was fully charged. The birthing room was ready, stocked with everything the midwife had recommended, alongside items from Margaret's journals that had aided laboring mothers for generations. As darkness fell, the wind intensified. Rain lashed against the windows in horizontal sheets. The lights flickered once, twice. Then they went out completely, plunging the cabin into darkness. Emma felt her way to the kitchen drawer where she kept emergency supplies. Her fingers closed around Margaret's hurricane lamp, a sturdy, old-fashioned piece of brass with a glass chimney. She had filled it with oil days earlier, anticipating this very moment. The wick caught easily, casting a warm, golden glow that pushed back the blackness. The lamp had been one of Emma's first discoveries in the cabin, found carefully wrapped in cloth and stored in a cedar chest. Margaret's journals mentioned using it during many births when the electricity failed, its steady light a comfort to women in labor. Now it would serve that purpose again. Emma carried the lamp to the main room and settled into the rocking chair. Outside, the storm raged, but within the cabin's sturdy walls, a strange calm settled over her. She felt oddly safe, as if the generations of women who had weathered storms in this place were lending her their collective strength. The first contraction came just after midnight, a tightening deep in her lower back that radiated into her abdomen. Emma breathed through it as Carolyn had taught her, then reached for her phone to note the time. No signal. The storm had knocked out the cell network, just as it had during her preterm labor scare. But this time was different. This time, she was prepared. A second contraction came 20 minutes later, followed by another. Emma walked through the cabin, the lamp in her hand, the familiar space transformed by its golden light and the percussion of the storm. The contractions gradually grew in intensity and frequency, but they remained manageable. By dawn, they were coming every 7 minutes. Emma tried the phone again. Still no signal. The landline was just as dead. Outside, the storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had intensified. The driveway would be impassable, the roads likely blocked by fallen trees. "It's just us," she told her baby as another contraction built. "But we're not alone. Not really." Emma carried the hurricane lamp into the birthing room, its light glinting off the polished wood of the chair Margaret had used in countless deliveries. The shelves held everything she could possibly need, organized according to Margaret's methodical system. The journals provided guidance for each stage of labor as the contractions intensified. Emma found herself speaking to Margaret, as if the long-gone midwife could somehow hear her across the divide of years and death. "I need your steady hands now," she murmured between breaths. The lamp's flame held unwavering against the fury of the wind, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In those shadows, Emma could almost believe she saw movement, the shape of a woman with confident hands and a determined chin, moving about the room with practiced efficiency. A trick of the light and her laboring mind, surely. Yet the image brought comfort instead of fear. The pain of the contractions became something to be ridden rather than resisted, each wave bringing her closer to meeting her child. By noon, the contractions were 3 minutes apart. Emma moved to the birthing chair, positioning herself as Margaret's journals described. The lamp sat on a small table beside her, its light a constant, reassuring presence against the chaos of the storm. Outside, trees bent under the wind's assault. Inside, another kind of storm was reaching its climax. The ancient, elemental storm of birth that had raged in women's bodies since the beginning of time. In the moments between contractions, Emma would reach out to the lamp, drawing strength from its warm glow. Margaret had held this very lamp through countless nights like this one, a beacon of calm for women in their most vulnerable moments. Now it was serving that purpose once more, connecting Emma to that lineage of women who had given birth in this room, under this roof, guided by the same steady light. Time lost all meaning as Emma's labor intensified. The storm outside matched her internal rhythms, powerful surges followed by brief moments of relative calm. Rain hammered the windows, the wind rattled the chimney, and through it all, the hurricane lamp burned steadily, its flame unwavering in the chaos. Emma moved between the birthing chair and the small cot, following her body's instincts. The contractions had become a relentless tide, now only a minute apart, each one demanding her complete surrender. She breathed through them as Carolyn had taught her, focusing on Margaret's lamp when the pain threatened to overwhelm her. "It's time. I can't do this alone," she gasped, as a particularly powerful contraction crested over her. The words were barely out of her mouth when she felt a distinct shift, a presence in the room that was indefinable yet unmistakable. A current of warm air brushed her face as if someone had just walked past, though the windows were sealed tight against the storm. "Margaret?" Emma whispered, half delirious with pain and exhaustion. No answer came, but the feeling of companionship remained. Emma reached for Margaret's birthing journal, which she had placed within arm's reach, and flipped to the passage on transition, the most intense phase of labor, just before pushing begins. "Transition brings doubt," Margaret had written. "Every mother believes she cannot go on precisely when she is closest to meeting her child. This is the moment to remind her of her strength, to ground her in the knowledge that women have been doing this since the dawn of time, and that she is never truly alone." As if in response to those words, Emma felt another presence enter the lamp's circle of light. Her own mother, who had died when Emma was in college. Not physically, of course, but a memory so vivid it felt like a visitation. Her mother stroking her hair during a childhood illness, murmuring that everything would be all right. Then others seemed to gather. Women she had never met, but whose stories she had read in Margaret's journals. Women who had given birth in this very room, under this roof, guided by the same steady hands. Their collective strength flowed into Emma, an invisible current of female fortitude flowing across generations. "I'm not alone," Emma whispered, as another contraction built. "We're not alone." The next hours blurred into a primal experience of pain, effort, and gradual progress. Emma consulted Margaret's journal when she could focus, following the careful instructions for when to shift positions, when to rest, and when to begin bearing down. When the urge to push became overwhelming, Emma moved back to the birthing chair. The storm outside had begun to subside, though rain still fell in a steady rhythm on the roof. Inside, another kind of storm reached its peak. With every push, Emma felt the baby move lower. The pressure was immense, the sensation indescribable. She gripped the arms of the chair, worn smooth by the hands of countless other women, and pushed with all her might. "Margaret!" she cried out, during a brief pause between contractions. "Help me bring this child safely into the world." The lamp's flame, in a sudden, impossible surge, burned brighter, bathing the room in a flood of golden light. A warm, phantom breeze swept across Emma's sweat-slicked face, a strange caress in the shuttered room, though no window was open. With the next contraction, she pushed with renewed determination. She felt the baby's head crown, a ring of fire, a searing intensity as her tissues stretched to their absolute limit. Breathe. Ease the head out gently. She remembered the words from Margaret's journal. Too much force can cause tearing. Emma panted, fighting the primal urge to bear down, allowing her body to stretch, to yield. With the next surge, the baby's head emerged completely. Emma reached down with trembling hands, feeling the miraculous, slick roundness of her daughter's skull. One more push brought the shoulders, and then, in a rush of fluid and profound relief, the rest of her body slipped free into Emma's waiting hands. A perfect, whole little girl. Her tiny chest hitched as she took her first breath and let out an indignant cry. Emma lifted her daughter to her chest, pulling the warm, wet body against her own skin. Tears streamed down her face as she marveled at the miniature fingers, the upturned nose, the dark hair plastered to a perfectly formed head. With shaking hands, she reached for the scissors and cord clamps from Margaret's birthing kit, following the diagrams she had memorized from the journals. The cord was severed, and the baby was swaddled in a soft blanket that had been warming near the wood stove. As the storm outside finally exhausted itself into a gentle rain, Emma carried her daughter to the small cradle. Beneath it, she pulled out a handmade quilt she had discovered weeks before in one of Margaret's cedar chests. It was a beautiful creation of interlocking circles in shades of blue and green, with a small embroidered tag meant for the next Sullivan child. Emma wrapped her daughter in the quilt made by Margaret's hands, decades before either of them had existed. The fabric felt weighted with meaning, a physical link between past and present, between loss and new life. "Welcome to the world, Grace," Emma whispered, giving her daughter the name of the child Margaret had lost. "You have a great legacy to grow into." In the soft glow of Margaret's lamp, mother and child rested together, the circle complete. Morning sunlight streamed through newly washed windows, illuminating Emma as she nursed her 3-day-old daughter in the rocking chair. The storm had finally passed the day before, leaving behind a scoured clean landscape and roads that were slowly becoming passable. Carolyn, the midwife, had arrived the day after the birth, having walked the last half-mile where fallen trees blocked the lane. She examined mother and baby thoroughly, her voice full of admiration for Emma's successful solo delivery. "You're both in perfect health," she declared. "You did everything right, Emma. Margaret would have been so proud." Dr. Chen had come yesterday, bringing supplies and checking Grace's vitals. "She's a beauty," she'd said, watching the newborn's alert eyes track her face. "A true Sullivan." Now, as Emma settled Grace against her chest, the rumble of a vehicle broke the morning silence. Peering out the window, she saw Iris's pickup truck navigating the rutted drive, followed by several other cars. Grace finished nursing just as a knock sounded at the door. Emma adjusted her clothing and went to answer, holding her newborn securely in one arm. Iris stood on the porch, her arms laden with a large basket covered by a checkered cloth. Behind her was a small crowd. Dr. Chen, Amelia from the library, Walter and his wife, and several other women Emma recognized from town, but didn't know by name. "We hope we're not intruding," Iris said, but her eyes were already fixed on the tiny bundle in Emma's arms. "We came to say welcome." "Welcome." Emma stepped back, gesturing them inside. The group filed in, each person carrying something: covered dishes, wrapped parcels, flowers, handmade items. They arranged themselves in the main room, forming a gentle semicircle around Emma and Grace. "It's tradition," Dr. Chen explained softly. "When a baby is born in our community, especially at home, the women gather. We come to welcome the child and to hold up the mother. Iris set her basket on the kitchen table, lifting the cloth to reveal an array of carefully prepared food: bone broth, hearty stews, freshly baked bread, and jars of preserves. "To give you strength," she said. The same food the community brought for Margaret when she first moved here, though she had no baby to nurse. An elderly woman Emma didn't recognize stepped forward, her gnarled hands holding a small wooden box. "I'm Nana Jenkins. Margaret delivered all 4 of my children in this very cabin. This box holds my mother's medicine spoon." She opened it to reveal a sterling silver spoon. "Good for measuring tonics. Margaret used it for my babies. Now it's for yours." One by one, the visitors came forward, introducing themselves, offering gifts. And each had a story about Margaret: births she'd attended, illnesses she'd cured, wisdom she'd shared. Through their memories, Margaret's presence filled the cabin more vividly than ever before. "I didn't realize. I didn't know she meant so much to so many," Emma said, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. "Margaret was the heart of this community for decades," Amelia explained, placing a hand-knitted blanket in the cradle. "When she died, we lost our center. The empty cabin these past few years. It felt wrong somehow, like a church without its pastor. And now it has life again," Iris added, gently touching Grace's dark hair. "The circle continues." Walter's wife, Mary, placed a large wicker basket on the table. Unlike the other gifts, it wasn't new. The wicker was aged, yet it remained sturdy and beautiful. "This is from all of us," Mary said. "It's the traditional welcoming basket, passed from mother to mother in our community." Margaret received it when she first arrived, alone and in need of support. She kept it, adding to it over the years, and gave it to every new mother who needed special care. After I had my Thomas, she gave it to me. I've kept it safe, waiting for the right time to pass it on. The basket held small treasures: a silver rattle, tiny hand-sewn booties, a christening gown yellowed with age, and a journal filled with the notes of generations of mothers, recording their children's milestones. At the very bottom lay a sealed envelope. On it, in Margaret's familiar, elegant script, was a single name: Emma. "She knew," Emma whispered, tears welling. "She knew someone would come." "Margaret believed in continuity," Iris said, "in the threads that connect us through time. She was preparing for you long before you knew you needed her." The women stayed through the afternoon, taking turns holding Grace so Emma could rest. They shared birth stories, mothering advice, and the town's history. They cleaned the cabin, prepared meals for the coming days, and organized the baby gifts. And through it all, they wove Emma into their circle as if she had always belonged. As dusk fell and the visitors prepared to leave, Dr. Chen stayed behind. "You know," she said, watching Emma settle Grace into the cradle, "Margaret always said this place had a purpose beyond her lifetime, that it was meant to be a sanctuary for women in transition, especially mothers." "It saved me," Emma admitted, "when I had nowhere else to go." "And now?" Dr. Chen asked. Emma looked around the cabin. It was no longer a temporary refuge, but a home, infused with history, purpose, and connection. "Now," she said, gently rocking the cradle that had waited decades for this moment, "it's where our story begins." Autumn leaves blazed in fiery color against the October sky as Emma walked the garden path back to the cabin, Grace nestled against her chest in a sling. A year had passed since her arrival, a year of profound transformation, from a desperate flight to a deep-rooted belonging. Grace, now nearly 4 months old, gurgled happily, her bright eyes tracking the dancing leaves. She has Margaret's determined chin, Emma often thought, though everyone in town claimed she was the spitting image of her mother. The garden had yielded a bountiful harvest. Margaret's heirloom seeds produced vegetables with flavors Emma had never tasted in store-bought produce. She had learned to can and preserve, guided by Margaret's detailed notes and Iris's patient instruction. The pantry shelves were now lined with jars of tomatoes, beans, and applesauce that would see them through the winter. The cabin, too, had changed. It was no longer the dusty, disorganized haven Emma had found, but a well-tended home that honored Margaret's collections while making space for new life. The birthing room remained largely as Margaret had left it, now restored to its original purpose, a sacred space for bringing life into the world. Word of Emma's successful, unassisted birth had spread, and women from neighboring towns had begun seeking her out, asking questions about herbs, pregnancy, and natural childbirth. Though Emma insisted she was no midwife, she found herself sharing Margaret's wisdom, pointing women to resources, and sometimes just listening to their fears. Dr. Chen had suggested she consider formal midwifery training. "You have a natural gift," she'd said during Grace's last checkup, "and you've inherited a wealth of knowledge from Margaret. The community needs someone like you." Emma had been thinking about it, reading the books Dr. Chen lent her while Grace slept. The idea of continuing Margaret's work, of using the cabin as she had, as a place of healing and new beginnings, felt right in a way nothing in her old life ever had. She paused at the edge of the clearing, taking in the scene. Walter had helped her replace the porch steps and patch the roof before winter set in. The weathered gray siding was now a warm cream, with green shutters Emma had found in the shed and restored. A curl of smoke drifted from the chimney, a promise of the fire waiting to warm them after their walk. As she drew closer, she noticed a car parked in the drive. The sleek German sedan was a jarring note against the rustic landscape. Michael's car, as out of place as he was. Her heart gave a hard thump. After a year of silence, why now? He was sitting on the porch steps, and he stood awkwardly as she approached. He looked thinner. His city clothes hung on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Emma," he said, his voice strained, his gaze locked on the baby. "Is that—" "This is Grace," Emma said, one hand moving protectively to her daughter's back. "How did you find us?" "Your mother. She didn't want to tell me, but I convinced her you should at least have the choice to see me." He took a hesitant step forward. "You look different. Stronger." "I am different," Emma acknowledged. "Why are you here, Michael?" "I made a terrible mistake." His words came in a rush. "Leaving you. Leaving our baby. I spent a year trying to convince myself I'd made the right decision, but I was wrong. I'm here to make it right. To be a part of your lives, if you'll let me." Once those words would have been everything Emma wanted to hear. Now they stirred only a distant sadness for what might have been. "Grace deserves to know her father," she said finally. "We can work something out. But this is our home, Michael. Our life is here now." Relief washed over his face. "Can I visit? Maybe she could stay with me in the city sometimes, when she's older?" "For now, visits here would be best." Emma shifted Grace in her arms. "Do you want to hold her?" As Michael awkwardly cradled his daughter, Emma watched them with a mix of complicated emotions. She felt no desire to resurrect the relationship that belonged to a different Emma, the one who needed validation from others to feel whole. This Emma, forged by Margaret's legacy and her own journey into motherhood, was standing on ground of her own making. Later, after Michael had left with a promise to return soon, Emma settled into the rocking chair with Grace. Above the mantelpiece hung the wooden sign she had carved during the last weeks of her pregnancy. Margaret Sullivan's cottage, it read in careful letters, the name she had officially filed with the county records. "That was your father," she told Grace softly. "He'll be part of your life, but in a different way than I once imagined. You'll have both of us, just not together. And you have something else, too. Margaret's legacy. This home. This community." Outside, the last rays of sun struck a stained glass panel Emma had found in Margaret's workshop and hung in the east-facing window. It cast prisms of color across the floorboards, a rainbow bridge between the past and the future. Emma rocked her daughter gently, feeling the continuity of all that had come before and all that was yet to come. Margaret had transformed a personal tragedy into a life's purpose. Emma would honor that transformation by continuing it in her own way, not by erasing her past, but by building upon it, creating something new and beautiful from what was once broken. Here in this cabin, she had found not just shelter, but sanctuary. Not just a hiding place, but a home. She had found not an end, but a beginning.